In this episode of our CEO series, Stuart Hughes, IOSH President, speaks to Léann Hearne, CEO of LIVV Housing, to find out what she thinks of the health and safety profession.
Carrying on our CEO podcast series today, I'm joined by Léann Hearne, the Group Chief Executive of LIVV Housing Group. Leann, thank you very much for giving us some of your time today. Really looking forward to having a chat with you. But for those that perhaps don't know what the LIVV Housing Group do, could you just give us a bit of background in the organisation that you run?
I can. So we're a housing association, primarily based in a single community in Liverpool, in Knowsley. Our aim and objective is to give homes to people who could otherwise not afford to buy one. So around 13,500 homes we own and manage, and we also are really well known for social investment and social impact. So we do much more than just house people.
Awesome, and I'm excited to talk to you because I love organisations that have like a real clear purpose. So that's really exciting. And I think from a health and safety perspective, when we think about, not only the organisation and the employees, but serving a public population and no doubt the kind of whims of the public and also the challenges of contractor management and stuff. So we'll dig into all of that, I'm sure. Okay. One of the things that I want to start with is what I think is quite a lazy trope, but it is there on LinkedIn and other socials quite frequently. And it's really that there seems to be this pervasive view amongst the global workforce that the people at the top of organisations don't care about the people on the ground. And I just wondered why you think that kind of exists and how that resonates with you when you hear something like that.
That annoys me intensely, as you can probably imagine, because I don't believe that. I also think it's a really lazy statement to make from a global perspective. If you go to America, I used to work for an international business, so I've worked in many countries, and I can tell you the standards of businesses and how they look after their people and their manufacturing setups vary massively between China, Korea, America, Germany, France, UK. So how can we say that a global view is that people don't care about their people? Because I don't think that's right. I don't think we help ourselves in the UK because we tend to have a bit of a negative view. We're half glass empty kind of nation, and we've got a press that supports that view. So I think we tend to focus on the minority. So the minute you see something go wrong or a business go wrong or something happen where people aren't looked after or a health and safety crisis, then there's a massive assumption and a sweeping statement that everybody does exactly the same thing. So I think we don't help ourselves in that view, but I don't believe that that's the case. And certainly in my experience, in lots of different countries, in lots of different industries, I've never found that to be the case. What I will say is I have found, and I'm not going to name them, but I know a chief executive of a really huge organisation that's international, that's a retail business with about 12,000 people in it. And he told me that he directly links culture and colleague satisfaction to profit. And therefore, it's his aim to make sure that people are happy in their jobs. Now, I have a slightly different view. It's not about profit for me, it's about people. But nevertheless, even at the worst case, if it's only linked to profit, then why wouldn't you look after your people? So I'm not sure I share that view. That would be my...
I'm on your side with that. I don't think it's a valid view, but obviously I think probably people put it up there from experience. But when we come to looking at your organisation and how you care for or look after your people, how do you ensure that isn't how they feel and they feel that the organisation's there for, I suppose, their benefit and they feel valued as a member of the workforce?
So, in a really small amount, I'll try and simplify this. When I inherited LIVV Housing Group, was 5 and a bit years ago, I inherited a regulatory downgraded, failing organisation where people in the business told me they were embarrassed and ashamed to be part of our organisation and they wanted their pride back. So I had a massive business turnaround. Now, the thing I think that showed how I cared about people was 6 weeks into the job, I did a culture survey, and 9 weeks into the job, I made life insurance mandatory for every member of staff. So I said to them, I value your lives while you're working in our organisation and we'll therefore insure every single one of you. And in the time that I've been there, I've had to make that payment for people who have died in service. So it's really well received. That was the starting point. The second point was we had a number of businesses in the group, maintenance businesses, fencing companies, building companies, all of which were on different terms and conditions, including sickness pay. So sickness pay and holidays were the main things that I said, if we can't all be in the same business with the same terms and conditions for that, then how can we have values that say we're about fairness? So I harmonised those terms and conditions. Thereafter, I would say that we're one of the organisations that people really aspire to work with now. We really focus on well-being and health. So when I talk about well-being, I don't mean just the basics that lots of people talk about. I mean, we have up yoga classes, we have something on every single Wednesday. Everybody's welcome to join. Even the guys who are out on the ground, so maintenance guys who are repairing homes or construction guys who are building homes, are welcome to come and join, and their managers must make time for them to do that. The same goes for training and development. So I've got loads of examples where I can tell you apprentices or people who started their life as a plasterer are now in senior management positions, because I have a view that if we can train you and you want to learn, then we'll work with you. I'd rather keep you on side and keep you in the business. So we have loads of training programs. The other thing is that we have a really agile workforce, and I was one of the first that brought in an agile work arrangements for people. So the rule is you have to be in the office 1 day a week, and the rest you can work at home. What started off as people telling me they didn't want to come in for the 1 day a week, I now have a massive car parking problem because we can't keep people away. People are in there 5 days a week. We spent a load of money on refurbing the building. I said, if you're going to come into our office, I'm going to give you a decent cup of coffee, because nobody wants a crap cup of Nescafe. So we have really good coffee machines. We have really good relaxation areas and really good meeting areas. We've got a library for people who want to work differently. So we've got people who are neurodiverse in our business. We account for them. All of our equality policies take account of everybody, and we actively encourage people from different backgrounds with different challenges, and we account for them in the building and the way in which we work. So I would say if you were to speak to, and we have an employee forum called the LIVV Forum. They're elected members from across the business. And mark my words, I asked them what they wanted. They told me they wanted to be engaged, and boy, oh boy, are they empowered and engaged. So if they want to tell me that they don't want the conference agenda to look like it is, they tell me, and I work with them. And that for me is a great way. I mean, we have some humdingers, but we equally have some great messages. I've had messages from teams who've said, because I've not been well recently, are you okay, boss? And when people send you a message like that, you kind of know that people care about you genuinely. So that sounds like an impassioned plea, but yeah.
I think it's lovely to hear, isn't it? I think in that engagement piece, you know, it's more than just the work environment, isn't it? It's that thing, like you say, the genuine care for the individuals, and then that translates through into how people work, the pride in their jobs, you know, doing things safely. Like all of these things, I think, holistically come together to give you, you know, those outcomes and well, the outcomes that you want and desire. And just if I kind of spin us into the world of occupational safety and health, there's, especially within the profession, there's a call quite frequently for IOSH professionals to have a seat at the board or on the C-suite. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
I think it's a bit of a naive and narrow view, if I'm honest. I think that why would you have one particular profession that is more important than any other? And you can't have every profession. That's HR, governance, health and safety, manufacturing. You know, how many do you want to draw a line under? So for me, I think it's much more about the business itself and having a look through the lens of the business and the risks in which that business operates to decide what's required. So in all honesty, I came from manufacturing, and when I worked in manufacturing, which was the international business, we did have a health and safety person on the board. And the reason for that was because we had 12 manufacturing plants. Well, no, we had manufacturing plants in 12 countries. There were more than that, in different cultures, in different arenas with different safety aspects. And so, yes, for then, it was a massive risky business with 4,000 or 5,000 people in it that really needed to be looked after. So I would say in that instance, it fitted the risk profile of the business. For where I am now, the risk profile I have is much more broad than that. So for me, it's around making a really good governance structure around health and safety and making sure that you've got the message from the bottom upwards, not just the top downwards. And just having somebody on the board, for me, is a top-down management tool, and I don't think that's the right way. I do have the voice of health and safety at my boardroom, but I have it alongside a number of others. So I have health and safety in property, I have health and safety in customers, and then I have health and safety in colleagues. Now, it all comes under one umbrella, but there are different responsibilities in different fields for those. So we have a health and safety space in the board agenda, but we have an executive director who has health and safety in their portfolio. So that's how I do it. But I think it needs to be less narrow and more acutely aware of what the business is.
I guess the thing for me there is when you're looking at, I like that kind of three compartments of safety and their slight differences, but singularity in the total, I suppose. How do you make sure that the information or messaging that you get is helpful, and what kind of thing is it that you need to be able to make those informed decisions?
I think it's probably helpful to tell you that in that first culture survey, which is really rare, this is really rare, the number one issue that came up with health and safety. Now, we've been downgraded for fire safety issues, so that made sense to me, which is probably why I'm so clear about the structure that we have and how information folds through. So we have an operational responsibility for people, and we've got groups at that level. We've got a strategic safety group, which is chaired by an executive director. And the issues that come out of that backwards and forwards and what make their way into a board paper. So there is a separate board paper that covers all of those areas, including the compliance issues. And the information we need from health and safety experts across the business is, one, I need the data and I need the metrics and I need the performance. I need the benchmarking data to tell me whether I'm good, bad or indifferent. I need that data to compare to last year, this year, future positioning. And then the other bit is that whole piece around, and I have to say my team are really brilliant at this, is that whole piece about knowing that I can sleep at night. So we are currently in the stage in housing, which is the first time since housing was known that we have got the biggest change ever. So in hundreds of years, we've got more regulation changes that happened on the 1st of April than ever before. And at that point, I knew what was coming down because my health and safety team sent me notes for making sure that I included them in my board report, gave us comparisons to say where we stood against that regulation and where we were, and gave me guidance about when we would need to implement things and what changes we needed to make, and then the policies and procedures that would link to all of that. So that was all proactively sent to me without me having to ask for it. That for me is a great piece. In return for that, what I do is I make sure every author of a board paper there's a box at the end of the board paper. There are 3 boxes about the implications. One is risk, one is customer, one is health and safety. And whoever authors the document has to say what they have considered the health and safety implications of that report and what may need to change as a result. And that means authors across the business have to then consider the health and safety in their decision making, and the board are aware of those. So it's a quid pro quo.
Mm. And I really like that because it puts some ownership, accountability and responsibility on the people that are making the statements, and it means that you're demonstrating that thought process throughout the organisation. So that's interesting to hear, and I'm sure the members will find that a fascinating one. So you've just given some kudos to your safety team in terms of they're giving you the things that you need, which is great. I suppose more broadly, or perhaps if we unpack that a little bit more, so at a very top level, the ability to sleep at night, it seems like a fairly reasonable thing to ask for, but what else do you need from your safety team? Does it go beyond that? And how do you kind of, I suppose, put that vision to them of what you want to see within the organisation?
The way I explained it when I first arrived was, I can remember years ago when HR was called personnel, and it was the thing that everybody assumed that they did for you. So when you recruited somebody, personnel did it, and they filled in the forms. And there's been a view that shifted that said HR or people management, we call it people management and culture management is everybody's responsibility, and HR provide the tools to keep us safe. And I see the health and safety function in exactly the same way. So it is everybody's business in our organisation to get that right. So what I really look for from people who are going to work in that function is, one, they need to help me sleep at night because there's an awful lot that keeps me well awake. Well, they need to be proactive in giving me guidance and telling me I'm not an expert in this field and I don't wish to be or profess to be. That's why you employ people who can do this better than you. So therefore, proactively give me guidance on what I need. The really, really important thing is communication. And I know that sounds a crass thing, but that's normally the number one thing you get in a culture survey. And it was number 2 on ours at that time. And that is what I have seen in the past is bad examples of health and safety leaders is that telling, you must. I used to have a guy that worked for me many years ago who came from the army, and he did use that phrase all the time, you must, we must, you must. And it was how can you take the word must out, and how can you do that? We shall work together, or this is the best way of doing it. So I expect a health and safety expert to be able to come to our business, come to our table and tell me how they are going to help me embed a safety culture across the piece. And that means they've got to be the ones that work with the communications team, because maybe the health and safety expert isn't an expert in comms, but work with whoever it is that can help them do it. And I mean, do it in a way that is received well by the audience. So not for the academic or the executive director. This for me is take one of our low pay workers where English might be a second language and where their literacy skills are at the worst. Don't write them a 47-page document on health and safety. Do something really simple so they understand it, and then we'll get it from the bottom upwards so that health and safety is fair across the business. And the other one, and this is one of the things that has been across my whole career, is I have a phrase, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth and you need to use them in that order. And where you've got expertise, which can sometimes go from advice into telling, it's listen carefully to what the challenges are, and then hear to understand, listen to understand what problems are and come up with a solution. And if you spend more time listening than you do telling, then that's when you get real partnership. And that, to be fair, in Strength of My team, that's exactly what they are. They really are partners. When we have something go wrong, and we're in housing and we're in construction, things go wrong. When something goes wrong, I've got people across the business who the first people they will call is the risk manager and the health and safety manager. You don't often get that, and that's because that's partnership where people trust one another.
And that's the critical thing, isn't it, in terms of, I always think if the organisation's not talking to you, you're in trouble, right? But you want to be people that people will come to and tell you what's going on. And I think the other thing there that's very interesting is, safety isn't necessarily always about the solution. It's about helping to find the solution. So this piece of actively listening to what's being told, understanding the problem, and then looking with the people involved to say, okay, well, how do we work to a better position? And I think those skills are really critical. So I think that's a really lovely piece to pass on. We spoke about you being able to sleep at night. So perhaps this question, what are the things that you worry about within your organisation, and why do they cause you concern?
Well, I think I've probably already tripped out the joy that is working in social housing at the moment. We are under the spotlight by government, and we're under the spotlight by regulators. So I currently have, and all fair and square, by the way, it's just that it's all come at once. In response to some of the other challenges that we've seen from Awabishak, who died in a social housing property in Rochdale, there are a load of examples, which is one of the points I also make, that doesn't mean that the millions of social houses in the UK are all the same and as bad as that. Nevertheless, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And our data in our organisation is probably some of the best I've seen, because we failed to start with. So when I arrived, we put a load of those in. all of those challenges and all of those changes mean you are only as good as the last piece of data and the last visit that somebody made to a home or to a person. And changes can happen really quickly. So damp can occur within 6 weeks. All of our regulatory framework talks about an annual check. So the responsibility there and the gap that we have is my worry. I'm in a borough where we're the second most deprived borough in the country. I've got people in my homes who can't afford to heat them or feed their children, and therefore that makes me worry that we A, what are they going to be doing, and B, what are we going to be doing as a business, and where does the risk apply for us? And then I'm going to give you one worry that I have that probably won't have been said by very many people is I have a real worry about mental health. And that is because of the people that we are dealing with. Just painted the picture. And at the same time, I've got 500 employees across our business, and 300 of those people will be going into those people's homes, either to fix them or to support them or speaking to them over the telephone. And the impact on colleagues, as the pressures have been, has been huge. We've seen a massive increase, not just from customers, but from colleagues as well. And it worries me that we are doing enough, that we can work as quickly as we can, that we're addressing those, that we're supporting our colleagues enough to deal with some of the terrible things that they're having to face. So that's a big worry. We're doing a lot with it, and we're doing some research with the social housing sector on a national basis about what we can do. But in the same way that damp takes 6 weeks, mental health doesn't take an awful long time to go to crisis point either. And I worry about what I don't know.
And I think that those things are health as a whole of health and safety is probably the ugly sister, if you like. It's the bit that we've not focused on as well, because ultimately perhaps it's easier to look at the kind of incidents and react to those, or to focus on the prevention of them. But actually the ill health is the thing that harms more people, and actually leads to more loss of life and other difficulties within people's existence. And I think that that example there of, well, from a governance perspective or from a legal requirement, there's an annual check, but in the interim there's potentially a significant unknown, and we have to address that challenge. It's a really interesting bit of insight there. And I think that the other piece on mental health, people will say, well, is it a safety person's responsibility, or should it be in another field, and I don't think that's the right question. Fundamentally, if we're an organisation and we're asking people to work for us, and part of that work is going into challenging environments and dealing with things that probably do cause discomfort or distress, then we should have mechanisms to support those people, irrelevant of who's there to build and implement the processes. They should just be there, shouldn't they? So I think it's a really interesting point to bring up. And I think that the challenges that are there for organisations, such as yours, to go, actually, okay, well, what can we do? What's within the realms of things that are reasonable, and at what point do we have to not be involved and involve other people who are the specialists to do those things? Much as you said earlier, like we're not experts in everything, so at some point you have to go and engage the services of somebody that knows more about the topic area. And I think that's the balance piece in mental health that people struggle with sometimes.
Sure. And I think that's the point about partnership, isn't it? That's the point about working collectively together to be able to find the solution. And there'll be expertise in a number of areas, and when they all come together, then you can find a way of doing it. But as yet, I don't think we as a country have found the answer to that, let alone me as a business.
No, and I think that if you take the I'm going to go glass half full rather than half empty on this one, and say, well, the conversation has moved on significantly, in, I suppose, from a national picture, and the fact that we're having even this discussion is probably a positive thing, but it doesn't mean that we're closer to finding the solutions for these things. But they are, what we need to do is empower people to be able to be open and talk about them, and then for us to have the mechanisms in place to support people that need the support. I think one of the things that's quite interesting for me is the reputation of the IOSH profession. And we're basically seen as people who go around and stop things from happening. But, business doesn't get done. There's all of this red tape, there's et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's quite unfair. I think that, a good occupational safety and health function is an enabling function that lets or helps organisations deliver what it is that's their purpose or their intent or their output, however you want to describe it. I just wondered what your view of the profession was and what makes you see it that way.
So I think it's an ethos, not a function. So I think if you can get health and safety into the belief of everybody in the way that I've shared, that some of my colleagues will ask for support and guidance from risk and health and safety experts when there's a challenge, but equally about how we can make it better. So for the mental health challenge, for example, our health and safety team are the ones that are supporting the HR team for us to be able to come up with some of the answers there. So I think it's an ethos. I don't believe it's a stopping function, never have done. Even going back many, many years to when I was in the manufacturing profession in different countries, I don't think it was that. I've never seen it as that. I do think there are some businesses where that happens, but they're generally in businesses where they're failing at their health and safety records and putting people's lives at risk. So I'd expect them to be stopped. But beyond that, I don't see it that way. I think if there's a challenge at all, it may be about the way in which you're perceived as a function and perceived as a sector. In the same way that social housing currently is being reviewed as something that's doing a bad job because somebody's child died in one of those homes, and not everybody's home is that bad. So we have to get better as a sector in telling people what we do really well beyond just housing people. And I suspect with you guys, it's talking about how you enable things to happen, how, innovation comes and new products get designed, and health and safety helps you make them to keep somebody safe, but also makes those products work because the environment in which they're tested is sensible and so that they can be sold into the wider world. It's about positioning and arguing the reputation in a different way, I think. So I've never seen it as something that stops. I've seen it as something that enables, and certainly from my experience in 5 years, health and safety function and those people in that function are the ones that helped us get back to where we needed to get to. So as long as there is a collaboration between the two parties, but that may not be the same in every business, in which case what's going wrong in the businesses and don't apply it to the whole sector as a badge would be my point.
Yeah, and I think that ownership of our brand and our stories and talking about, the successful integration of safety into, as you just lovely articulated, products being designed, innovation happening, there's some amazing things that humans are capable of doing and are doing, and safety has a role to play in that. And I think we're, for whatever reason, been too much in the background and didn't really stand up for ourselves when we had quite a lot of challenge around, I suppose that what people thought the perception of the profession was. So hopefully conversations like this can change it, where we hear from leaders that say, it's not like that, and this is my experience. But also, if it is like that, here's a challenge to go and really investigate your own organisation and identify what you need to do to move it to where it needs to be. So thank you very much for that. That was really nice. Just for our listeners that might work in an organisation where they perhaps don't get exposure to people at the top of their organisation, but would like to kind of enhance or build their relationships, have you got any advice that you'd give for the safety profession to build meaningful relationships with their leadership team?
I think the way in which you start the point is you ask, you listen, and support. So the profession has a bit of a reputation from the background from years ago when my dad was still working in manufacturing, of the clipboard health and safety guy or girl, as it were. And I suspect that is the challenge. So how people can be successful and work in partnership with their business and support their leaders is to ask them what they need and what's worrying them. What can we do to help? What are the problems that you're facing? What are the challenges that are presenting themselves? What are the opportunities that are presenting themselves? And how can we make that get delivered for you? And then I think it's about working. So I have a view, and my chairman has a view, that when we're making a decision at board level, I think it's not literal. The decision will be put in front of me, and I will metaphorically have my risk map in front of me, my corporate plan, which is a 3 to 5 year plan, to the right of me, and my business plan, which is my finance plan, to the left of me. And the decision has to meet all of those areas. Otherwise, we've got to change our business plan or change our risk appetite before we'll take that decision. Health and safety as a function, for me, sits in that. And working with risk partners, working with the risk teams in the business, and working with other directors to know what's coming up, be really clear you understand the direction of the business, what the corporate plan is, what the objectives and ambitions are, what the risk appetite is, so you know where you can take the risk, and then go, so what can I do to help you? And what were the areas that you think we need to do? Or, flip side of that is to say, and knowing all of that information, I believe your area of risk is X, Y, Z. And these are the things we can do to mitigate it. And these are the actions you need to take to help it, or help the people who are going to be doing that job, or make sure these policies come to life, or rethink something. But it's working in partnership there. But sitting in isolation, just going, this is the latest legislation that's come from HSE, and this is what we need to apply to a policy, is narrow. When you go beyond that and go, so what's the business ambition? Then I think people can really work together.
Yeah, I think that alignment piece to the objectives of the organisation, and that getting that understanding of pain points and challenges and seeing where you can add the value is a really important message for safety practitioners to hear. And I think that piece of like, do you want to be narrow, or do you want to be broad, and understands that the greater value you can bring is really important. Look, I know you've not been well, and you've done remarkably to give us so much within this. So I'm going to wrap this up with just some quick fire questions, if that's okay.
Okay.
Awesome. Yep. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Dead easy. My dad. 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in that order. And the second piece was, don't ever say you can't, always say you can.
Like it. Always got to respect dad's advice.
Yeah.
What's the worst advice you've been given?
The worst advice was from a male boss who said to me, the job that you want to do is best placed for men. Why don't you go and find a job that a girl can do easy?
That's appalling.
Yeah, I know. Isn't it terrible? The great thing is, he annoyed me so much that when I went home, my dad said to me, so how's can going to come into this sentence then? So yes, I didn't stay as a secretary, and I'm now a CEO thanks to him.
Here we are. Sometimes it's weird, isn't it? That's the motivation, but that's brutal to hear that. It's not cool, but here we are now, which is perhaps the best outcome that you could have from something like that. I don't know if you're a reader, but if not, maybe it's a podcast or a TV show or something that's educational. But what's the one book that you consistently return to or gift most often?
I'm not a massive business book fan. I think most people who write lots of business books have not actually done it. So I'm not a massive fan. However, there is one book that I have used in every business I've got called Mind the Gap by Graham Codrington. And he updates it periodically, but it's a study of how different generations behave in different scenarios and how the two can work together. So I have a strong belief that the legacy I need to leave is to make sure that there is a future for the next generations in the world of work that's challenging right now. And therefore, me being able to understand the next generations is important in that. And therefore, it's important for my people to do it. So generally speaking, massive sweep in generalisation. But leaders in big businesses at my level tend to be older than my children, who are 34 and 26 respectively. So that means that if we need to be able to shape the business for the future, I need to hear their views. But me approaching them in the way that I would approach them might not get the best outcome. So that book helps me understand how to respond to a child, to a parent, to a relative, to an employee, an employer, from different generations. And I have used that book since it was first written about 15 years ago. It helped me shape and design how we did retirement villages when we designed them. It's helped me shape services for customers, but it's also helped me think how we define our offer for colleagues when they come and join us. And I give that book and have given it book to every director in our business.
Cool. I'm off to get that book. This is why I've asked this question, because very selfishly, I want to I'm always on the question for more knowledge and being a bit curious, but that's a great recommendation. And I think that, there's just going to be a much larger generational span within the workforce, as we continue into the future. And I think having that understanding, empathy and relational aspect throughout the generational gaps or differences is going to be an essential thing. So that's going to be straight on the Amazon order shortly.
There you go.
Providers are available, I think you're supposed to say. But, cool.
You
And then the final one.
Sorry.
There is the final one. Just what failures provided you with your greatest learning?
Okay. So I'll try and avoid naming the company, but I went to work for a business that's a huge business. And I knew within day 3 that the persona of the business and the way they positioned it was completely not what was inside. And I knew within day 3 it was the worst decision I'd made to go to this business. I was there for a year because that was the period when you had to have a year on your CV. It's a bit different now, so my daughter continues to tell me, but then you had to have a year. So I had to stay in this business for a year. And I was... They did a merger with an American business in the first week, and I was involved in that. I was in a much junior level then. I've never experienced such bullying, such poor safety records, such terrible behaviours in a meeting and in a boardroom where people bawled and shouted and judged you on the car that you got. How I came out of that year intact, I don't know, but they knocked my confidence massively. And when I came out of that business, I couldn't wait to get out. But I learned more in that year about how not to do it than I have ever had the opportunity since. So it really brought it home to me how to do things right. And I probably didn't use all of that learning straight away. So when I started with LIVV and some of the challenges I was seeing with people who were downbeaten, that learning 20 odd years ago suddenly came into mind. So I had a year of massive learning, hugely painful, massive learning.
And I think sometimes you don't always appreciate what you've learned going through some of the hardships or the challenges, but they expose themselves later on and you can kind of mine the value from them. So I think that's a really lovely example, and thank you for sharing it. And thank you very much for sharing your time, experience and insight with us today. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. It's been a real pleasure to meet you, and I'm really grateful that you agreed to join us and have a chat. And if there's anything else you want to leave the listeners with, I'll let you do that.
The only thing I'd leave the listeners with is, if you value yourselves and value the service that you offer, and you communicate that really well, then there's no argument for the recipient to receive it in the same way. So I would say, do not undervalue just because of reputational challenges from the past, and really start finding a way to position and brand yourselves far better, because my experience of health and safety is fantastic.
What a place to finish.
Thanks for listening. Tune in again soon for more conversations on all things health and safety.